Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to explain about kernel modules. Let's get into the video. What is kernel module? Why do we go for a kernel module? In traditional way of adding code to the kernel involves two steps. One is after adding your changes, you have to recompile the entire kernel. Second one is you have to reboot the entire system to reflect your changes. To avoid this, modern kernel introduced kernel modules. Kernel module also a piece of code that can be dynamically loaded or removed from the kernel at runtime. Extension of kernel modules are .ko. .ko stands for kernel object. Other names for kernel module is loadable kernel modules, or simply we call it as modules. Same point I have put here for reference. So why we use kernel modules? There is no need to recompile the entire kernel, and also there is no need to reboot the entire system, and also keeps the base kernel as small as possible, easier for development and debugging. For example, if you are writing a new device driver, then you will start as a module only for easier development and debugging. So once your code is bug free and stable, you will start submitting your patches. Your patches will be reviewed by kernel maintainers. So once the reviewing process has been completed successfully, that's where you can able to see your code in the kernel source tree. For example, if you are downloading Linux source code from kernel.org, then you can able to see your code in drivers folder. Examples for kernel modules are device driver, file system, then network protocols. What is the difference between device driver and a kernel module? As we discussed earlier, device driver is a piece of code that will communicate with the hardware. For example, if you have any device, you must need a device driver to control or configure that particular device. So device driver always deals with the hardware, but modules may not be always a device driver because many times it won't deals with the hardware. You can write modules for file system support, and also you can write modules for more network protocols and all. In these two cases, it won't deal with any hardware. Only if you write any device driver as a module, then in that case it will communicate with the hardware. In this slide, we can see a basic boot process of a kernel module. At boot up time, first your base kernel image will be loaded. Once the kernel image is loaded successfully, then it will initialize all the basic hardware and the core functionality of the system. Then your file system will be mounted. Finally, your modules are loaded at the boot time. Like user space, all the binaries are present in slash bin folder, and all the libraries are put under slash lib folder. There is a standard location for kernel modules also, that is lib modules, then your kernel version. So inside that, if you go and check, all the modules will be present over there. What are all the disadvantages of a kernel module? Core functionalities cannot be added as a module. For example, if you take process management or memory management related stuff, you cannot add it as a module. If you take a boot process, first your BZ kernel image will be loaded. So after that, your file system will be mounted. Then at the later stage only, or all the modules will be loaded. So since memory and process related stuffs are the core functionality of a kernel, it cannot be added as a module. Second one is problem of security. For example, any user with root access can add any code to the kernel as a module. If you are more concerned about security, then you have to disable the loadable kernel support in the kernel config. To enable or disable loadable kernel support in your kernel, you have to enable the below config in your kernel configuration file. Here I'm going to show you the Linux kernel modules path practically. So I'm using Windows subsystem for Linux. There will be only minimal modules present over here. So we can go to the lib modules, cd slash lib modules. So I want to see the Linux version installed. You can see using minus a. It's a 5.15 version. So I'm going inside 0.15 version. Here if you see there will be a kernel folder. Here you can see inside drivers folder there will be many .ko file for actual vanilla kernel and all. Here I am using Ubuntu subsystem for Linux, so there will be very minimal ko files present over here. Dot minus iname star.ko. Only this much ko files are present over here. So here if you see a little bit more, so can see 14 ko modules so present here. And also I want to show you the config file which enable loadable kernel module support. I have already downloaded cd dd linux. This is the plain Linux kernel. Here if you see cd arc configs, there will be Raspberry Pi def config will be there. Here if you see, if you search for a modules, see here in this Raspberry Pi config, loadable kernel modules is supported. If you want to disable this, then you have to remove this config modules option. Thank you for watching.